Hello, and welcome to the Learn Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network Community Education Program. Today's topic is the graying of divorce. This content is provided for general information purposes only and is not to be considered legal, financial, or health advice. Please consult with your legal, financial, healthcare, or other service providers before taking action based on this information. Welcome. My name is Dara Ray, and I am the president of Learn. Today, I am joined by our guest educator, JoEllen Watson from Gray into Gold Coaching. Dr. JoEllen Watson is a certified wellness and life coach and an advanced grief recovery specialist who has dedicated her professional life to people's physical and behavioral health needs, primarily in Washington and Idaho. Dr. Watson holds a PhD in social welfare from the University of Washington. She is a licensed clinical social worker in both states, as well as a clinical supervisor in Washington. Her clinical focus has been in crisis intervention and therapeutic modalities using trauma-informed care. Her career includes direct services, clinical supervision, professor, lobbyist, and director of or administrator in the public, nonprofit, and private sectors. She is a former sociology and social work tenure-track professor at Seattle Pacific University. JoEllen, hello, and welcome to our Learn Community Education Program.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and to discuss this very interesting phenomena that's happening and has been happening for a while, but I appreciate the ability to do a deep dive into this topic because I found it very interesting. And as you well know, I experienced this myself, and I will be sharing a little bit of that story as I go through here.
Sounds great. Well, why don't you kick us off into the graying of divorce?
Okay, so we'll go to the first slide. So, of course, this is a baby boomer phenomena. And much like many of the phenomena that have happened since the baby boomers were born, so late 60s and forward, we're seeing that the graying of divorce has been driven by our cultural normative way of challenging society. So what gray divorce refers to is this new trend, and it's actually not new, but this historical trend of divorce that occurred in the US since the 1970s among adults, and we're looking at those aged 50 and older. And primarily the research has been looking at those marriages 20 years and longer. The gray divorce is also, and I had not heard this before, but I saw it several times. It's called also called silver splitters and diamond divorce. And I think that may not necessarily be in the US, but since this is an international trend in Western cultures, those terms may be used in other places, in other countries. I had not seen those terms before. And when we talk about this group of age 50 and older, generally in the research, they're broken up into two cohorts, and one is considered the middle-aged from 50 to 64, and then the other is older age 65 and over. And there are some really interesting statistics about the differences and the trends, the continuing trends around this middle-aged and then older aged 65 and over. So why don't we, I'm changing my slides too, why don't we go to the next slide? So here are some trends. In the divorce rate was low in the 1970s, across all groups, but mostly in this group. And it grew very modestly until the 1990s. Of course, we know what's going on between 1970, if you're married, and 1990 is families. You're raising kids, and that as we move to why now are we seeing this trend going up in this cohort, families are, there's not kids being raised at home. So we can kind of see why that happened. And then in 2010, the divorce rate doubled for age 50 and over. So one in all 4 divorces was age 50 and over, that a large cohort. Now, since then, the rate has decreased slightly in the middle age group, those from 50 to 64. But where it's increasing, and this is really when we broke this down and I looked at it, the rate is increasing in that older age group, and that's 65 and up. So you would think that, or at least common sense would say to me, that it really is the middle age group that you might see it going up, but it's actually the 65 and over where it's still going up. Now, for the first time in history, this phenomenon is women initiated. So 2/3 of all divorces in these categories, in this gray divorce, is women initiated. So that is a new trend, and there are reasons for that, which we'll look into here in just a minute. But I thought that was really interesting. So let's go to the next slide and take a look at what are some of the factors impacting the social trend. So really, baby boomers, we grew up, I say we, I'm in that cohort. Baby boomers are socialized to challenge cultural norms. We've been doing it all through our history, and I think as we age, that's no different. And over time, divorce is no longer a stigma. I mean, we knew that in the 50s, 40s, and 50s, stigmatized if you divorced. And as we've aged, it's just less of a stigma. I think one of the big things that why we're seeing this trend in especially the 65 and over is an increasing life expectancy. So a male today, age 65, can expect to live on average to age 84 and almost a half years, 84 and a third years. And females age 65 today are going to expect to live on average to 86.6. So getting close to that 70 or 87-year-old range. And 1 out of 4 65-year-olds today will live past the age of 90. And if that isn't a reason to start thinking about finances, and again, this notion of how do I want to live the rest of my life, which is a real driving force in some of the factors of why we're seeing divorce, even in that 65 and over range. So, and also just looking at the interesting life expectancy demographics, 1 out of 10 people who are 65 now will live past age 95. That's 30 more years. That's a significant time, particularly if you're in a marriage where you're unhappy. So some of the other factors, and we have several pages of these, and we call this one past regrets. It was funny. I met with a woman friend of mine yesterday, and she is divorced now, and divorced very late in that 70-year-old cohort. And this married right person at that time, that's what she said. I said, well, what drove you to get married at that time? And she said, he looked good to my family. He was the right person that my mom and dad would approve of. And this is a factor that people self-report, that at the time they married in their 20s or 30s, it was because it was the right person for friends and family. And so they did it. So kind of the right person, or, it's the right person at the right time to do what they were doing. And now as men and women have aged, they're looking at this life expectancy and thinking that they maybe didn't make the right choice for their entire life. So again, I think that really drives to compatibility. And right now, and as you know, the baby boomers are like, we want to be happy. That was something, we deserve to be happy. And so now we look at compatibility as, how is my marriage? Am I happy? Do I feel compatible? And that really is driven some by the empty nest. When those children are gone and they're adults and they've left the home, then if people start looking at each other because they've been so focused on this very important thing of raising children, and now they look at each other and see that they have drifted apart. Retirement in this compatibility is a big thing. One of the common comments is, I have to spend so much, we're spending so much time together and we are not compatible anymore. I don't know how we grew apart, and retirement really drives that, because there's so much time spent together. And I didn't see this in the research, but I think moving forward we will. I'll be interested to see what 2021, 2021, and into 2023, what the pandemic did to this.
Yeah.
Because I think that, what happened is we're all stuck together in a way, stuck together in the house. And so whether you were retired or not, you were either telecommuting at home and doing work, but it felt like retirement because everybody was colliding into one another. And so it'll be interesting to see what the later demographers find about, and sociologists find about, if we add the pandemic to this. So I'll be looking forward to seeing those numbers. So let's continue looking at the additional factors that really have caused this trend. Technology has made it so easy to connect with people. So you can be in sitting at home finding old boyfriends or girlfriends, finding new ones. I mean, dating apps and just the advances have made it so easy to connect. Or you find yourself talking to a coworker and you're finding more compatibility with that and spending time online. Another thing that impacts the social trend is, as we age, while we were working and moving into retirement again, finances and spending habits that could be masked as we were bringing in large incomes, when that goes to fixed incomes, you start seeing the differences and how people either manage or don't their spending habits, and some of the secret spending on both parties' sides that could happen while you were bringing in income is really exposed. So this is a big topic as we go into retirement. And then again, sexual desire and infidelity, those things tend to, the incompatibility between these two things, between two partners in sexual desire, is exposed later in life. And it can be on both sides. And then of course, infidelity, which, in the last couple of years, we all think of one of the most, at least public divorces, were the Gateses. And that in large part was due to infidelity. So this happens as we age. Now, actually, infidelity and addictions aren't really reported as one of the highest factors. There's other factors that are driving this, but they are there. And when we talk about addictions, we're talking about to pornography, gambling, those things that can, and drug and alcohol, in retirement, sometimes people turn to those addictions as a way of coping with not having thought through, what is my purpose? What am I doing? What do I want to do after retirement? And really can't get a grasp. And so shopping, all of those online addictions raise their head and can cause divorce. Aging differently is an interesting one because, as I read the literature, it does seem to be, while aging differently can happen, differently between men and women are going through a different phase of menopause is over. They're if they're in retirement, they're having time to exercise. They're wanting to be a little bit more active. And sometimes, as it was written in some of the articles I wrote, that men are aging differently during this time. They do have a lower life expectancy. And so some of their illnesses, some of the illnesses that are gendered related, start showing. And there's a difference in, it's not always women aging differently or better than men. Sometimes men are more active, bicycling, golfing, and women are not active. But this aging differently is a factor.
And is that referring primarily to like physically aging differently, do you think?
No, I don't. I think it also is a mindset. This excitement. I think as it was written in some of the more popular research, that it's not really research, it's the most popular reports. Women are like, okay, kids are gone, I'm not having to work so hard, I see things differently, I'm ready to go, I want some adventure. And men are like, and sometimes men are like, look, I've worked really hard, I want to do some resting, I'm content to be home, I'm studying things on the internet. And so this aging differently is sometimes a mindset, and sometimes it's about who can handle pain differently in the couple. If you're constantly talking about, oh my gosh, I'm so old, and our language about how we age is very important. It's our narrative. Your narrative is, I'm getting old, this is all all these aches and pains, I can't do anything about them, it's just age related, versus I'm going to be my best self at every age, and I'm going to power through this, and I'm going to get used to living with a little bit of pain, a little bit of aches and pains, or I'm going to go find out what I can do about it. So that is a mindset that isn't necessarily gender driven. It'd be interesting just to look at that very factor independently to see how pervasive that is in self-reporting.
Interesting.
So let's go. There's more factors. The biggest one is women's role in society now. And I think that's why you're seeing 2/3 of the divorce in this age group being driven and initiated for the first time by women. Women just have higher expectations of being married now. They want something different, and they want to feel happier. And there's a real desire for emotional fulfillment. Of course, that again is the baby boomer culture. We're pretty self-driven. There's an expectation of equal partnership, changing roles in the family. So there is some trending, particularly in this age group, that now I'm first. I don't want to just be the nurturer all the time. I want some independence. I want some adventure. So again, that's personal fulfillment. I didn't finish my degree. I didn't get this job I wanted. I had a dream that I didn't fulfill. I want to go back and look at that dream and see if I can do something about it now. ageism as less of a concern. And what that referred to is the role of ageism as a single person. So that there's less concern that I am going to be an older adult and alone. That is still there though. And as we get to what to think about if you are thinking of divorcing, that is an area that people think long and hard about moving ahead in moving to a divorce. And then finally, while women still do not make the same amount of money as men do in like positions, there is still a greater financial independence in women right now, which allows them to be able to think of living alone or separating or divorcing. These are the women's role in society. This gender changing is a real driving force in even that group 65 and over, because this age group, you're collecting your retirement, your Social Security, you're collecting, for those of us who had pensions or retirement funding, you're able to get that, have access to that as we age into our 60s. A little bit more, there's a few more. I think there's one more. No, here's what to consider if you're thinking of divorce. There is a financial decline for both men. They see men decrease their financial assets by 11% and women 27%. So your financial, if you are thinking of divorcing, really looking at your income and how it will change and seeing if you can live with reduced assets. The other thing to consider is responses of adult children and grandchildren. I read several articles about the responses that can happen from adult children that are negative. And since women in this older cohort are initiating, a lot of times it is directed at women, but not always. So, and then, thinking of grandchildren, how do you continue to have a relationship with grandchildren? And what would happen if you divorced, and what would happen if you stayed? So those are really, and I'll stop right now and just tell a couple stories, because I've been talking a lot with my women friends in this age cohort because I divorced after a nearly 30-year marriage, and I'm nearing 70. I'll be 70 next month. And I had three women friends that I went to college with that were in the same circumstances, very unhappy. And they chose to stay in their marriages because of the adult children and grandchildren, not so much the reaction that was negative. The divorce would have split the family in financial ways, and the adult children felt that they would end up having to care for one or both adults earlier in life rather than that couple being able to take care of one another. There was some real concern, and these three women have stayed in their marriages and created new lives for themselves and are really quite content, but they really worked at it. But it really was, they really considered, what is this going to do to my family? and access to grandchildren as freely? What are holidays, birthdays? What are all these things, graduations, weddings? What are all these things going to look like if we're divorced and they chose to stay? And quite frankly, found a way to be happy. So
That's the key, right? If you choose to stay, find a way to be happy. Yes.
You really have to, and we're going to talk about that as we move through. If you decide to stay, you have to put yourself first to a certain extent and rejuvenate and go back and think about what was my passion, what has been my passion, what are the passions I put on hold? Because it's not always doing the things that you've always done. It's finding a new pathway to find happiness. Sometimes that's art. With two of my friends, it's art. They took up painting. They do yoga, both of them, and a third, has selected to do something else. So it really is, if you're staying, you can't try not to stay and be miserable, because you've got a long life expectancy.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider is health concerns. And of course, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, but health concerns and being alone as you age, and we're all going to die from something, right? And if you have some ideas, if you have some chronic conditions now that you can impact, like type 2 diabetes and weight loss and mental health, if you can do those things and prepare yourself to move to divorce, do as much around your health concerns as possible. And sometimes you can't, or your partner, you can't. So it is something to really think long and hard about. The other thing to consider is your living arrangement. The likelihood that the initiator is going to be able to stay in the family home is not as great as what you might hope or think. So you have to think about, am I male or female, ready to give up the place that I love? I raised my family. There's so many memories here. Am I going to be willing to give that up? Because that will become, the primary home will become a factor in the divorce. It's an asset. And male or female, do you want to live in a large home by yourself and be responsible for all of that? So living arrangements, where you're going to go, how you want to live. I made that decision when I divorced, that I never wanted to own again. I really want the freedom of not having to take care of the next broken thing or a leaky roof or doing a yard. And so I live in a rental townhome and will stay in a rental. You never know tomorrow, but that is the choice. And I thought about that before we sold our brand new home that we built.
Wow.
Social connections, again, I'll talk a little bit about myself. I was a bit taken back by friends that we had for years that will not speak to me, because I was the initiator of the divorce. And I have lost some friends because that I initiated. And that's not a minor thing. As we know in the longevity area, that social connections is one of those things that really determines how long we live and how well we live. So in things to consider, you have to think about, what is this going to do to my social connections? And am I prepared to create a new group if I have to? And it also gets to living arrangements. Where do you want to live? You might move someplace where maybe you don't have a lot of social connection. And are you a person that can develop that over time? So these are, this is not a minor decision to think about, financial decline, responses of your family. I missed emotional impact, the initiator versus the other person, regardless of who it is, the initiator does better emotionally. And then health concerns, living arrangements, social connections, these are not minor issues.
Not at all.
Not at all. It's kind of all of it, right?
Yeah.
Kind of all of it. So let's see, let's go to the next slide. Here's some more things. Oh, some legal matters. So when I divorced, I forgot that everything was in a trust. And again, it's not a minor thing to disband those trusts. We still have, we've been divorced, well, 6 months, but moving toward the divorce for more than a year. Our bank accounts are still, it still says the trust name on it. We still share credit cards and a credit score. And I have been remiss, I have not changed my durable power of attorney. These are things that you can think ahead of. I did not realize how bound we were by particularly the credit cards and credit score. Quite frankly, the credit card companies, they don't care that both your names are on them. You have to initiate removing the partner's name from these credit cards.
Yeah, the administrative reality of managing the business of life and separating is really difficult, challenging, for sure.
It really is, and you forget, because you're just so, it's like, we got to get rid of the house. The retirement plans, when you have an attorney, and I would encourage people, if there seems to be some issues around here, is to use a mediator to try to work some of this out, so that they help with, well, what about your bank accounts, and how are you going to handle shared credit, and your credit score will be affected because your income is going to reduce. And the health issues around durable power of attorney, those are important. Who is going to take care of these things? In my situation, I'm the initiator, so I'm going to say this. I have a pretty good relationship with my former husband. We talk pretty frequently, and he is still my power of attorney. And by default, because we have that power of attorney, I am still his. I still think he would look out for my well-being, although he does joke about be careful I don't get a cold. But we can laugh at those things. I will be changing that before too long. As we grow into our lives, he should not have to be responsible for making these decisions for me, because things do change. What I want changes, and he's not necessarily abreast of that, or vice versa. Again, retirement plans, there is no way your retirement plans are not going to be affected. They just are. And that's why this decrease. Shared responsibilities, and what I'm talking about there is, again, grandkids to a certain degree. If you are, have younger ones and you're babysitting them, or really active in their school activities. For me and for us, it was our dog, and the care of the dog, and how the dog was cared for is in the divorce decree. How long everybody gets the dog, all of that. Now the dog has an end life for sure, and that shared responsibility will go away. But you have to think about, what are we going to do about if we have pets? And the bigger the pets, like horses and anything else, the larger the responsibilities of how that's going to work out. The other thing is, what are your future goals? Do you see yourself traveling? Are you going to have the means to be able to do it? Are you willing to travel by yourself? Whatever those future goals are, you do not want to work. Sometimes you have to go back to work. Sometimes you get to go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about, these are things to consider as you think about divorcing and thinking about your future goals. If you see yourself with a partner as you age and with those goals in your future, there are things that you can do to rejuvenate your marriage. So we'll talk about those. And the other thing, that new relationships and dating, this is not a minor issue. This is not a minor issue, because I have to tell you, and I have looked, there is no handbook on how to date in this older age, even 50 and over. But when you get to 65 and over, there is no handbook that says how this goes. So for myself, I have been thinking, I found myself as I was dating and thinking about relationships, I would see myself falling back into that nurturing pattern, of which is a large part of why I left my marriage, is I did not want that significant. I had a significant role in that, and I did not want to do that anymore. But I find myself, that's really funny, I'll see myself wifing somebody, and I just have to pull myself back. Even if the person I'm dating likes that, they're used to that role, I have to pull myself back and say, you're wifing again. You're going back to that role. And it is a struggle for me, maybe not for everyone, to know, what does dating look like at this age? How do we do this? For myself, I'm clearly not wanting to be married again. And so what do these relationships look like? Maybe that's a book out there waiting to happen. I don't know. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's been thinking about this, but
Sure.
That's not a minor one. It took me by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to really consider. If you enjoy the companionship of, in any relationship, how do you navigate that in older age, as we age? So let's see, I believe, okay, so if you're not ready, or you decide this is not the direction to go, you could try some things, like try a trial separation. If both parties are willing to do that, you can make it legal and do a trial separation. I'm not sure that there's a lot of benefits to making it legal, but there may be. You could live apart for a while, but the person who moves out of the home still considers it their primary residence and refers to it as home. So it could be in a location. I did this. I moved out and I still went to the house daily, looked after things at least daily, sometimes twice a day, considered it my primary residence, called it home, but I had my own apartment for a while to see, was this really what I wanted to do? And how could my former husband, how was he coping? So you can see, what is this going to be like? It's temporary and it might be somewhat artificial, but you'll know pretty quickly if you feel happier and more relaxed, or if you're like, I don't like this. So the other thing to do is really start giving your marriage attention. Be intentional with increased focused attention on your partner. Even if it feels awkward at the time, really paying attention to your partner can bring back emotional connection that has been lost by years of working really hard and raising children and not being able to be so focused. And then really doing this with intention of developing relationship as you both have changed over time. Who is this person I'm with? And that means sitting down and working on your shared interests. They don't have to be identical, but they can be shared interests. What do we have in common now? And really looking at that. It might be completely different than what you used to. You might not want to go back to riding Harleys together, or you might, it might not be what you started. But it could be a new shared interest. Of course, this is marriage. The last one is marriage, period. But I think as we do years and years and years living together, we maybe don't listen and see our partners as clearly as we did, clearly when we married. And now, if you're wanting to stay together, to really listen and really see your partner. Now, that can go either way, right? You can look really closely and go, I don't know who this person is anymore, because I have forgotten who I am. And then really give it a try, really listen and try to see your partner. And you can, as my three friends demonstrated, find a way to be happy. And find a way to be, maybe content is a better word. These aren't easy either.
No.
And these aren't easy either. So let's see what's next. So if you do decide, again, the person who initiates does better. I don't know where that curve is. I don't think it always stays that way. But I would suggest seeking some professional help if you're ambivalent, or even for support as you go through your divorce. It's really important to reconnect with family and friends that maybe were not as close with. And those social connections are really critical to how well you do as you age. Live where and how you want. If you're living in a part of the country that you don't want to live in, if you're living in a place that you don't want to live in, and you want to do a different lifestyle, I had historically huge gardens and a lot of different ones. Right now, I grow basil. And that's it. And if I want to slam the door and walk out and be gone for 3 days, there's nothing stopping me. So I'm trying to get to the place where I'm living exactly how I want. And it has taken a while, and it doesn't happen overnight. So when you do this, you have to put yourself first. Part of people divorcing is putting themselves first. But now you have to really decide you're going to do that. And that it doesn't matter what that is. If you caring for your grandchildren puts you first, then do that. If you wanting an art class, if you wanting to travel, just make sure it is your mission, your passion, what you want to do, and not what other people are expecting you to do. Consider going back to work if you've retired. And when I say that, I don't mean you have to go back to the traditional, the work that you left. I'm doing something, I mean, while it's in the people helping business that I've always been in, it really has taken a different form. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you decide you're going to be a greeter at a department store or a box store or wherever, or you're going to take up a completely different kind of work. If work offers you a way to socialize and it gives you structure in your day, and there might be something, working in doing handiwork or doing something that you are really good at but have never really looked at it for your work, and you want to work 10, 15, 20 hours a week. So it doesn't have to be what we're thinking about, oh, I've got to go back into full-time nursing or full-time construction work or full-time whatever it was, automobile repair or CEO. You don't have to do that. You can think about what it is you want to do. I did not do this myself, but I do know people who have done a divorce support group and have found it very comforting, and really that way to make that social connection. And if you're doing multiple things like retiring, selling your home, and divorcing, those are all losses. So don't forget to do some grief work. It's really important that you acknowledge these losses, even if you're the initiator, and that at times things are going to, you're going to feel like you have really had some losses, even if you feel you've had gains. Live like you are single. Well, you are single. So what does that look like? A little bit like the last one, and that's learn to be alone. And that is a learning curve, because you are used to having someone around as a safety net. So live like you are single. For me, and learn to be alone, what that meant was I had to look at what are the social things I wanted to do. And it took a couple years to figure that out. And you can't be afraid of trying something and not liking it and moving on and not feeling like you're a failure, you're not going to find anything. You just keep looking for the things that are now a fit for you. And one of the things that I do, and that has turned out to be a really important piece of how I live, is I am willing to go do a lot of things by myself with not a book. I don't look at my phone. I sit and I have dinner. I go wherever it is I'm going. I go listen to music, and I sit by myself and be willing. And that's kind of an uncomfortable place. I mean, you think people are looking at you and going, wow, doesn't that woman have any friends? But you are really surprised what happens when you sit there and you're willing to be comfortable and make yourself comfortable. I did that on New Year's Eve. I was at a very popular restaurant here in Boise, and I went for a 3-hour dinner in a large booth by myself and had a great time. And 3 different groups of women walked up and said, you are such an inspiration. And you sat here by yourself on New Year's Eve and had such a great time. So if you can, learn to be alone, learn male and female, or, however you self-identify, to be able to sit and be comfortable and look comfortable is really important, I think. And you are so surprised about what happens. I think, is that our last slide?
It is.
I have some resources for you, just anywhere. These are this is the research from mostly sociologists and some national and international. And then the next slide is really more popular sources that you can go to. Leslie Steiner she also has a podcast that is about divorce. And you can just Google these, or you can just Google the graying divorce, and there is a lot of really good basic information about straightforward self-help. So it's out there if you're looking for practical guides. If part of what we did here was look at some of what the demographic trends are and things like that. But
and if they're looking for support here in Boise, is this the kind of coaching you help with as well, JoEllen? And can they reach out to you for that as well?
Thank you so much for asking that question. And the last slide, that if they get this is how to get in touch with me. Absolutely. The Gray into Gold is age-friendly coaching across the lifespan. I started with women 50 and over and quickly found out that some of the same issues that women deal with at 50, they're starting now to deal with at 35 and feeling like they're aging out. And what is my role? And again, that's just to this trend of, am I self-fulfilled? What is my mission? What is my passion? And so, but transition and going through this, again, I won't share much about myself, because really coaching is all about what you want and what are the action steps you take. But I have been through this, and also, I'm starting a call-in talk show on Radio Boise in July. And so you can listen to me there, and I'm on social media all the time. So yes, reach out. I'll make space.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much, JoEllen, for sharing this really thoughtful and insightful presentation around what should be considered when facing the idea of a gray divorce, and how to consider that, how to find additional resources, and what it might mean.
Thank you so much for having me do this. I really learned a lot. I got to do some self-reflection again. I mean, a little bit every day, but this was, a very good exercise for me to do. And I hope other people will find it helpful.
Well, I hope so too. And if you have found this session helpful and would like more of this type of information about navigating the joys and challenges of aging and caregiving, we invite you to join our Learn mailing list at learnidaho.org/mailing list. You'll receive something from us about once a month telling you about new resources and information available to you free of charge. We do have more than 100 topics in our video library in the areas of health, wealth, lifestyle, caregiving, technology, and community resources. Sessions just like this one available on demand for you to explore and learn in your time. And a little bit about Learn, Lifelong Education and Aging Resource Network. Our mission is to help people navigate the joys and challenges of aging and caregiving. Our vision is to serve as a trusted source of information and resources provided to you, the community, by members of the community like JoEllen at Gray into Gold Coaching. And our purpose is to provide free education for mature adults, family caregivers, and the professionals serving them. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope to see you again at a future session.